Hello and welcome to another episode of Mr. Boskin Does Some Math. Today we are doing Illustrative Math Grade 8, Unit 8, Lesson 2 Practice Problems. Okay, our first problem says a square has an area of 81 square feet. Select all the expressions that equal the side length of this square in feet. So if we know the area of a square, how do we find its side length? We have to figure out the length and width. Length times width, so what number do we multiply? If it's a square, those have to be the same, so what number do we multiply by itself to get 81? The other way to think of that is what number squared is 81, or what is the square root of 81? Well, A is 81 over 2, 81 divided by 2. That is definitely not it. Half of 81 times half of 81 is not 81. B is the square root of 81. That works. Well, what number is the square root of 81? It's 9. 9 times 9 is 81. The square root of 9 isn't going to work. And 3, which is the square root of 9, is not going to work. So the answer to this one is the square root of 81 or 9. Now our next question here is, what is the exact value of the side length in units of a square whose area in units is 36? Well, this would be the square root of 36, which we know the square root of 36 is 6, because 6 times 6 is 36. Our next one, 37, we want the square root of 37. Is the square root of 37 a nice number? No. So for this, we get to be lazy. The answer is the square root of 37. Now our next one, the square root of 100 over 9. If we have a fraction that we are taking the square root of, we can take the square root of the numerator and denominator. And the square root of 100 is 10. The square root of 9 is 3. So C can be 10/3. Now our next one, we have 2/5. The square root of 2/5. Neither of those have a nice square root. Put some parentheses there so it's obvious we're taking the square root of the whole fraction. The answer to this one is just the square root of 2/5. Now E, 0.0001. Do we know what the square root of 0.0001 is? We could also think of this as a fraction. 0.0001 would be tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. 1 over 10,000, which would be the square root of 1 over the square root of 10,000. The square root of 1 is 1. the square root of 10,000 is 100. What is 1 over 100? That's 1 over 100. That's 1/100th. Now our next one, we could think of, this one is the square root of 0.11. 0.11 is 11/100ths. This one doesn't work out so nicely. We do not have a nice exact value for this. So this one is just the square root of 11/100ths. Question 3 says square A is smaller than square B. Square B is smaller than square C. The three squares' side lengths are the square root of 26, 4.2, and the square root of 11. What is the side length of square A, B, and C? So we need to be able to compare these. One of them is the square root of 26. The square root of 26, we don't know exactly, but the square root of 25 is 5. So the square root of 25 is 5. So the square root of 26 has to be approximately equal to 5.1, something just a little bigger than 5. The other one we have is 4.2, and the square root of 11, well, the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 16 is 4. So this has to be a little bigger than 3 and less than 4. Square root of 11 is closer to 9 than it is to 16, so let's call that 3.2. It's approximately 3.2. So now, if we have three squares that are each getting bigger, the side length of square A has to be the shortest, which would be the square root of 11. The side length of B has to be our next largest length, which is 4.2. And then C has to be our longest length, which is the square root of 26. So that's our three square side lengths. Now our next question is find the area of a square if its side length is 1/5. How do we find the area of a square if we know its side length? We square it. 1/5 squared means 1/5 times 1/5. Multiplying fractions, multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. 1/25. Now, what is our unit going to be? Our side length was in centimeters, so our area will be in square centimeters. Our next one is 3/7. To find the area, we square it. 3/7 squared is 9/49. Unit squared. Our next one is 11/8 inches. 11/8 squared is 121/64 square inches. Our next one is 0.1 meters. Which is 0.01 meters squared. Our next one here is 3.5 centimeters squared. 3.5 squared just to give us a little extra fraction practice, because faith, fractions are your friends. 3.5 is 7 halves. Which would be 7/2 times 7/2, which would be 49/4 square centimeters. Okay, our next question. Here is a table showing the areas of the 7 largest countries. How much larger is Russia than Canada? Well, that's just a division problem. Let me scooch this over so we have a little more space to work. We would have to do 1.71 times 10 to the 7 divided by 9.98 times 10 to the 6, which would be, divide our first number, 1.71 divided by 9.98 is 0.171. Let me put that underneath so there's space for you to see it. 0.171 times 10 to the power of, subtract the exponent, 7 subtract 6 is 1. Now 0.171, we would want one digit in front of the decimal place, so we would want 1.71 times 10 to the power of what? Well, we had to move this decimal place one spot to the right. That means we have to subtract one digit from here. So that would be 1.71 times 10 to the power of 0, or just 1.71. So the area of Russia is 1.7 times larger than Canada. The Asian countries on the list are Russia, China, and India. The American countries are Canada, the US, and Brazil, which has a greater total area. The 3 Asian countries or the 3 American countries. So we now have to add Russia, China, and India, and we have to add Canada, the United States, and Brazil. Before we add numbers in scientific notation, we have to make sure that they all have the same exponent, the same power of 10. So Russia is the only one that is not 10 to the power of 6. So to change that to 10 to the power of 6, if we move our decimal point one spot to the right, we can then change that to 10 to the power of 6 so that we can compare the numbers more easily. Moving that one spot to the right would be 17.1 times 10 to the power of 6. So, the Asian countries are Russia, China, and India. Because all of these now have a number we can use where it is 10 to the power of 6, we just have to add the first term. 17.1 plus 9.6 plus 3.29, which is 29.99. So our Asian countries, 29.99 times 10 to the power of 6. So then we have to do the same thing for our American countries, which are Canada, the United States, and Brazil. So we have to add 9.98 plus 9.53 plus 8.52, which is 28.03. So our sorry about that. I had that so you couldn't see all of the word Asian. Our American countries are 28.03 times 10 to the power of 6. So, which has a greater total area? These both have the same exponent, so we can compare them. Which is larger, 29 or 28? The Asian countries have the larger total area. Our last question is, select all the expressions that are equivalent to 10 to the power of negative 6. Well, 10 to the power of negative 6 is a positive number. B is a negative number, so it can't be that. A, that's negative 6, which means 1 over 10 to the power of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So A works. C is 1 over 10 to the power of 6, so C works. When we are multiplying powers, we add the exponents. 8 plus negative 2 is positive 6. This is 10 to the power of negative 6, so that does not work. 1 over 10 to the power of 6 would be 1 to the power of 6 over 10 to the power of 6, which is the same as C, so E works. F is 1 over 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. 1 over 10 times itself 6 times, which is just what that is. This has been another episode of Mr. Boskin Helps You With Your Math. Thank you for tuning in.